it's a pivotal growth point where you have to say, I've been saying for years, oh, it'd be great to have support. It'd be great to have help. It'd be great to not do everything on my own. But then you get to this point, it's like, do you really want that? Do you really want that? Because if you're going to do it in integrity, then it comes with this other stuff too. It comes with listening. It comes with being aware of, okay, how do I need to start operating differently, communicating more proactively, having meetings and talking things through and having a plan and not doing so much last minute pivoting because you care about your people.
Yeah, it affects more than just you.
Overwhelm, reaction mode, and just keeping up are the old way.
You need real, root-level strategies and practical steps to grow your business or ministry without exhaustion and burnout.
Hi there, we're Anna Saucier
And Megan Gephardt,
best friends and business consultants who help faith-filled women create sustainable growth through simple strategy with a people-first approach.
Here at Apostolic Fruit, we hope to offer you clarity, support, accompaniment, and healing.
One tiny step at a time.
Hello, friends. It's Megan and Anna. We're back together today. Thank you so much for just being here and being with us on the journey. So today is going to be a little bit more of a behind the scenes. We're going to talk about what has been a very stretchy season for us. And we're going to look back at about 4 to 5 months of internal growth and transition and change within our own business and fruit. And I think that this will be really helpful just to see what does this journey look like for us. And how has that also been what has then reflected fruit in our clients' work and also even within our team? I think this will humanize us a little bit more. At least that's part of the goal here, is just to know that we are also real people navigating real life stuff and a lot going on, just as you are in your own personal life and in family life. And I think God really moves powerfully in these stretchy seasons. And so just want to give you some consolation in that you're not alone in that.
Hi, yes. I think every month of this that we're going to talk about, every month we've said, I can't believe it's only been a month. I can't believe it's only been 2 months in all of the stuff that we moved through. And just as initial thoughts on this, well, we've had some periods of working a little bit faster. We are operating in alignment with our values.
Yeah.
And that feels so good. I've not always felt that way.
Yeah. I remember, Anna, when I went to visit you it was November. I went to visit Anna in Guatemala. And at one point, we were just sitting there next to each other and we were like in tears, reflecting on how good it felt to truly be operating in such deep alignment with our values and how neither of us have ever felt that in the same way that we were feeling then. And there was so much happening. There was so much happening with connecting with new humans that we were really excited to start serving, and major stretchy growth for us personally as we were stepping into new ways of leadership and then as a team. And it was a lot going on. And at the same time, we just could feel the Lord's hand in it and that deep, deep integrity and congruence, and how every step along the way we were really honoring our values. And I think that's a place that has been really vulnerable for, at least on my end, for sure, inside my business in the past. When I was coaching, both as a mindset coach and also as a pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach, I know it's one of those places of vulnerability when you are externally serving somebody in their health and well-being, and you know you're operating in an unsustainable way behind the scenes. And you don't know how to get out of that. And that's something we're so passionate about. And I feel like now we just are so much more equipped to hold ourselves accountable and then also really support clients in that in an integrated way. And it doesn't always look and feel, I would say it never really feels perfect. It's not the kind of external image that you would expect, but the behind the scenes can still be in deep integrity, even when you're in the stretch. And so I think that's the both and that we want to speak to today.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can have this. For me, it kind of comes from a religious side of, if I'm doing all the right things, then everything's going to be going great, right? And it's not the case. We're operating within our values and we're still watching the financials every week and have to be really diligent and not always hitting the number that's needed. And it's just all of these really real things. But it is a value that we have, that we operate within the values first. And that's the fertile soil that then brings the results. Whereas it's tempting in the past to, well, I'm just going to get those things in place, get the systems and operators, financials or whatever, and then I'll have the space to operate within my values. And I think that's what we're learning and operating in. And I want to speak to as well, like you talked about the past disconnect with helping other people to live in integrity and take care of themselves, but not necessarily doing it yourself. And I can be aware of that in terms of my business. When I was teaching the value of operating in rhythms and having systems and operations, and I knew how good it was, but I wasn't doing it for myself until you came along. And so that, to me, that's been a big part of these past 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, the reality of doing work and relationship with other human beings makes such a big difference. And we've just learned this in our own experiences, like working together, our complementary gifts and strengths, it brings out the best in each other. And I think it also holds one another accountable in the best ways too. And so it's one of those reminders of you as a leader are not meant to do this on your own. And there's a reason it feels really, really hard when you're doing it on your own. And there's hard that comes with doing it with other humans. We'll talk about a little bit of that today. But at the same time, there is, I think, so much goodness in supporting one another in that and having the external eye to like reflect back to you, even just permission sometimes when you need permission to say like, no, go take a nap. You're really tired. Or no, you've had 4 client calls in a row today. Like, please, please make sure you're eating.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's the simple things sometimes, but it's the reality, right?
Yeah, for sure. Adding more humans doesn't make it 50% easier. But it changes things. It opens space for things to be different and lighter.
Yeah.
Even if it's not easier.
Yeah. So, Anna, as we begin this conversation, let's give some context for what has our personal lives looked like over the last 4 or 5 months. Just some high-level highlights.
I had even forgotten, like if we're going past December, how many times have I moved? 3 times? 3 times in the past 5 months. Is that right? It might have been 4.
Yeah, just thinking whether or not to move countries again.
Yeah. Well, that was the plan, moving to Europe and then different decision making in U.S. finances having an impact on my husband's work. And so moving through that and a lot of tension for at least a month and extremely uncertain circumstances around that was really stressful and heavy. And just carrying that personally alongside that, being around at the same time that we were launching the podcast, and just so much both and in that space. I guess we also took a trip to Mexico in late January. Yeah, that's enough. I mean, I don't have to try and think of something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So multiple moves, job uncertainty for your husband, in the mix of just a lot of continued internal growth. And I've seen and been supporting you deeply in stepping into leadership in new ways, even within our team and with clients and just personal healing. There's been a lot in the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, it's ironic that I didn't even bring up the internal stuff. That was real like external circumstances, right? But yeah, I think I could honestly say that there's been more deeper healing growth in the past 5 months than probably the past maybe year and a half or 2 years. So it has just been a lot in beautiful, fruitful ways.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On my end, my husband still being in the military, he was gone for 2.5 months from mid-January until early April. So I was solo parenting with my 3 boys who were ranging from 5 months old up to 3 and then a 5-year-old while he was away. And then I was also completing the Director of Operations certification program, which was a big focus. Ever since my son was first born, basically had him right at the beginning of that program. And it was 6 months and lasted through the end of February. So I was really focused in on that. And just, it's always hard when you're solo parenting and you got way less hands than you need to tackle all the things that need to be done. So I think both of us in those places, it was it was very intense in a lot of ways internally and behind the scenes. And yet we were deeply desiring to still pour into our clients externally, pour into the ways that God was asking us to continue to grow and share this message and our mission and share our voice in different ways. And yes, learning and continually practicing how to do that in deep integrity in the way that we're honoring our needs in the process and making sure that we're doing it from a place of rest and not from pressure, and that we are taking care of one another. I think that's been really, really beautiful to see.
Yeah, I feel like one of my deepest past wounds that's come into much greater healing is the tendency toward, like, I'm not feeling completely okay, and therefore I can't show up in this. And like my past operating, just having many more examples of, I have to cancel those calls. I need to take the whole day off, and not being able to hold those things at the same time. And for very many different various reasons, I've seen myself grow a lot in that, and being able to come and show up, and not because it's the way it matters as well. Not like, okay, I'm just going to show up and I'm going to put my stuff aside, but was more of an integrated way of being able to say, okay, yeah, there's some hard stuff going on, and I can show up for my clients too. And it's hard to describe the difference there, but the biggest difference is how it feels internally. Are you making yourself get up, put it aside, show up, because you can hear it in my voice, the tone, it's the tone of it, versus, okay, do I have capacity for this? Where am I at on it? Let me take care of myself. What are my needs? And then, all right, we can go.
Yeah. Yeah. And continually being honest with ourselves and each other about that, I think has been a really important piece, because it is that kind of sometimes even moment by moment awareness of, where am I bumping up against a capacity wall here, or where do I need to pause and evaluate or make a different decision? And I think so much of this is the nuance that comes with the discernment sometimes around capacity. It's like, where do I need to give myself permission to pause, to rest, to slow down, to maybe take a day off if that's what I need? And where do I don't even want to use the words like kind of buckle up, or like, let me just show up anyways. And what I'm hearing, Anna, is that you're able to expand your capacity to hold the both and more. So it's like, I can be there for my client and also internally, or, maybe behind the scenes, be going through something really hard, and I can support them in going through something hard. And both of those things can coexist. I don't have to be perfectly okay to support them in something in really meaningful ways.
Yeah, I think your word anyway is really the key to it, because we can say, okay, I mean, despite everything I've got going on, I'm going to show up anyway. Like a despite thing, rather than, I got a lot going on and I think I can show up too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It is a subtle but powerful nuance.
Absolutely. And in an ideal world, our work with clients is life-giving. It refreshes us. It is something that fuels us at the same time. And I think when you're really in your life's work, that is how it feels. There's aspects of it that are more draining than others, and just being attuned to that is really important. But generally, like, we love what we do. It's life-giving, and it's light in that way. So,
yeah. Yeah, and when you get used to holding more of the both and, you get to feel both at the same time. That is so common to think, well, I feel crappy. I feel like nothing's put together. I feel like my house is a mess and all of these. And so therefore, I'm not worthy of showing up with my clients and being a leader or being an authority. But it's just not true.
Just means you're human. That's all, right? And you can meet them in their humanity too, right? That's what it's all about. Yeah. So let's transition into a little bit more specifics of, I'd love to use our inflection point for us internally as a partnership, and then with our team, is where we were before doing our own internal strategic mapping process, and where we have grown into then following that. So Anna, I would love to hear from your perspective, just honestly, like where do you feel like we were if you would describe before we entered into strategic mapping together? What was working, what wasn't working?
Well, you're going to have more of the higher level strategic observations on this, but so I more easily can speak from just my perspective, I guess, as the, was CEO, as the leader. I feel like it was still Anna operating as an entrepreneur with people to help and in kind of reactive mode. And because for the strategic mapping, we didn't have rhythms in place. We weren't doing a lot of planning or following up on it or rhythmically watching the financials, checking in on those. And so it was all reactionary. And the team also felt the lack of communication and the reactivity of it all. I'm sure you felt it. And where are we at on these projects and what's going on and what idea has Anna already run down the runway with and we have no idea, right? I know you felt it and the others as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Anna, for your honesty and vulnerability. I think this is one of those places that I hope is a consolation. So if you're listening, if you're resonating with some of this, because this really is where we find most leaders in when we start working with them, and where so many of the frameworks that I had learned and gained from the certification program, as soon as we started to integrate them into our own business, like this is no longer the way that we operate. We're so far from that now. But at the time, that's how it was. That's how it felt. There was a lot of reaction mode. We were working towards more financial steadiness. This was a major stress point for us. And I had just transitioned out of the Army and needed to be able to replace a certain amount of income for our family just to be sustained. Same thing on Anna's end. And so we were working towards that predictability to bring in what each of our families needed. And that uncertainty, even on a month-by-month basis, was hard and was gradually increasing. We were seeing that, which was a good encouragement, but at the same time, so much deep prayer and wrestling and surrender, even as we're taking steps forward. And I know that will resonate with a lot of you as well. We were having a hard time. I think because it was taking every almost week by week, month by month, we were figuring out what we were doing next. We're just trying to figure it out as we went, right? Like so many people. And that was then causing almost a whiplash effect for our team. We had done a reflection kind of feedback opportunity with them towards the end of the year as we got going into strategic mapping so that we could take that feedback into the process. And the feedback that we received from some of the team members was, I don't really know sometimes what's happening on either a personal level or a work level, with either Megan and Anna making decisions either in separate times or not really knowing exactly what's going on. And so we knew that we needed to do a better job in bridging that gap of like, where are we going? What are we even doing? Like keeping them up to speed and just also providing better guidance. So including them in the process of decision making, communicating as early and often as possible with as much as possible, because you don't want people to feel in the dark, right? It creates a certain level of either anxiety of like, I don't really know exactly what's going on or where I kind of fit in. So that's where we were. I mean, that's where we were. We were in a more reactive state. And I want you to know if you're feeling any of that or if you're noticing, oh man, I probably am not communicating as proactively with my team because I'm just trying to figure out what I'm doing next week, then we see you and we get it. And I know that it can be challenging. There is a way forward.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking in my head, I can remember feeling so much. I don't know where we're going. I'm just doing my best. And that's so relatable. And it's okay also. There's a season for that. It's not wrong. Every different season, when you're ready for it, it comes from the awareness and the things that you're noticing and the things that you're hearing back. And so, Megan, like you were saying, we're hearing this from the team members. And I think I remember, and just for context, y'all, we have 2 team members. This is not a huge enterprise. It's us and it's 2 right now, although we would like to grow that. But I remember hearing from them, we love you and we love this mission and we love where it's going. And I know you can relate to this too, Megs. Like, we feel so aligned with this. And I also would really like more direction and I'd like to know where we're going. And that's another place of both and that you may be aware of. Like, people aren't going to, just to be really aware of that tension point. And especially when you're doing the meaningful work, your people will be they want to stay. They want to stay, but that's not enough. As a leader, it's important for us to be aware of the other things that are going on that they may not even want to speak about. Like, here's my point. I found it. They may not even want to say because they want to be in it. Right. And so it is more of our responsibility to ask the questions, to learn more about what is happening underneath, especially structurally, so that we can do something about it. To be aware of these needed growth points.
Yeah. And I love this point that you're making, Anna, the distinction of our team members were expressing it is so meaningful to be a part of this with you. Like, they loved working in collaboration and the opportunity to be a part of this, and our really supportive, encouraging culture. And they both expressed that just immense gratitude all the time for it. And they were craving more of the direction and the proactivity and knowing where are we going and how can we take initiative and be more empowered in their roles. And that was the next stage of maturing, I think, that we both needed to really step into, and that we structurally needed to create inside the business for everyone to be as well supported as they could be to do their part.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a both and, as we were just talking about in a workshop that we gave today. The both and of the internal maturity that needs to happen and the external maturity of the business itself. And I mean, I'll speak to the deeper internal side right now. It's a pivotal growth point where you have to say, I've been saying for years, oh, it'd be great to have support. It'd be great to have help. It'd be great to not do everything on my own. But then you get to this point, it's like, do you really want that? Do you really want that? Because if you're going to do it in integrity, then it comes with this other stuff too. It comes with listening. It comes with being aware of, okay, how do I need to start operating differently, communicating more proactively, having meetings and talking things through and having a plan and not doing so much last minute pivoting because you care about your people.
Yeah, it affects more than just you. And this reminds me of something that did come forth in the workshop today. One of our members was saying, in some ways, I almost want to go back to that level of flexibility I had when I was doing it on my own, because now, like, when I make more decisions to change things, or if I do things on the fly, or if I'm adjusting or whatever, it affects my people. And now I need to be responsible for them in a way I wasn't before. And so there's more of a burden of leadership that you're holding, and that can get heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is really, really important to be aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think the hopeful awareness here is that it doesn't just suck, right? What it's asking is a maturity. It's asking for an internal growth to grow into that feeling normal again. It's not like, okay, well, now I just have to start doing these things and I'm going to have to deal with it. It's an invitation into learning a different way of doing it and operating differently, into questioning and digging in and getting curious about the objections and the hesitations and the protections internally and working through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to now kind of fast forward a little bit and say, okay, if strategic mapping was our main turning point, which it really was for us as we did it towards the end of December, as we came into the new year, what came out of that session was tremendous. And I'm going to give some of the highlights here. This is also what we see when we do it with clients, but it had taken us a little bit to do it on our own. And you may resonate with that of you help clients in something and it's harder to do yourself sometimes, right? But once we sat down and did it ourselves, this is why it's so valuable to do. And so we had to first pause and name everything that was going on in the business. We opened everything up across all the different pillars of the business, which was very vulnerable, right? But it was so good because it was the objective look at asking the harder questions and helping us really see where things were. And it was that space that we needed to just pause, to slow down, to look at the bigger picture together beyond the next month at a time kind of cycle that we were in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not like it was a whole ton of new information either. I think the difference, so much of this work that we're doing together, we've done it together. It came out of both of us. It came out of our shared vision and the work that we'd already been doing with clients, but to pause and just dedicate the space and time to that, there is a significant difference there. It's kind of like when you can imagine, like if your spouse, you're like, well, we don't need to sit down and spend time together. We see each other every day. Well, it's a little different. And so there's a bit of an analogy there. If we don't take the space to pause, even if you are still operating on your own, just taking that space to pause, even though it's all running around in your head, but sitting down and writing it down and giving it space is a big difference.
Yeah. I like that analogy because you are in a relationship with your business. There's a real relationship with it. Just, like a human relationship. It's different, obviously, but there is a relationship with it. And so it does make sense that in order to look at it differently and go to a different level of decision making, in awareness, we need to create a space that we don't normally have. And we need to carve that out and we need to zoom back out. And I think that's the biggest difference when you set aside the time to do this. When I just finished strategic mapping with a client, she's like, I would have never dedicated 6 hours to doing this on my own. And it's so valuable because now she knows where she's going for the next year with all of the different projects sequenced out. And before, it's like all these things are swimming around in your head and you may know these things need to be addressed, but when and how and in what order and how do we do this in a sustainable way and what support do I need then to be able to carry that out? So that's huge. I think one of the biggest places that emerged immediately for us as we dedicated the time and space for this was clarity of the vision. I mean, even in the first session, we sat down, I think, for like 2 hours. And Anna, you were like, I've never had this much clarity of vision before in my whole life, right? Remember that?
Yep. Yeah, I know. I was sitting like right back there. I know I'm pointing and this is a podcast. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a beautiful process. And you have such a gift for bringing it out with visionaries. And I think, too, it's not like I'd never done that before. You sit down and you do vision exercises and it's where you're going. But especially we were in a pivotal growth point. Like we talk about this in our other podcast episodes, right? When you're in that space and you're beginning to see things differently, or at least asking the questions of, okay, do we need to evaluate that? And then doing visioning and asking vision type questions in the midst of that, it's going to feel different. And especially if you're stepping into more of your life's work role, and that the clarity is going to be clearer sometimes, but it's going to look and feel different.
Yeah.
And it may surprise you. And I think that's what happened for me. It surprised me.
Yeah, because we can sometimes, I think it's easy to like roll your eyes when you're like, okay, mission, vision, values. Like I've done that 10,000 times. Right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I still have the internal eye roll.
Yeah. And yet when I think especially with the leaders that we work with, like everyone needs external processing. You need a sounding board. It's like you're word vomiting all the stuff across your whole business. And you need somebody to receive that who can sort through it and digest it and offer the reflection back to you and be able to connect dots that you can't see again when you're in it. And so it really is different when you speak it all out loud. And in every stage, we do need to do this work iteratively because in every stage it differs. You're being invited to grow in a certain way in every new stage, right? Yeah. So that's one place that it was huge for us was the vision, the values, clarity, and that bigger vision that emerged. The other huge piece was that it really shifted our roles, our rhythms, our team, our offers. And one place in particular that emerged immediately for Anna and I was how important it was in order to even allow our team members to step into their gifts more fully. We needed to be really clear on what our roles were and like what's in the scope of our roles. And so we then started to hash out a bit more like what do we need as our own kind of boundaries and rhythms so that we can be operating in our roles and we can stay even a bit more in our lanes and know what is our responsibility to steward in this mission and this business and how does that play like one piece of the puzzle.
Yep. Yeah, without going through those kinds of exercises. And it's funny how this feels foreign to me now, but I think it's such a common way of operating that you have the visionary or the CEO or the leader who then just kind of dictates what everybody else does. And there's not truly defined roles. It's like everything's got to get done. And there might be a vague sense of people's positions, but it means it's a reactive, whoever's free, just pick it up and do it.
Yep, exactly.
But in that is so, it makes evaluating capacity extremely difficult.
Yep, it does. So we were able to then define what is our different roles when it comes to leadership within the team. That was huge. And there was an identity shift then that kind of was needed for us to grow into in our partnership together, as well as with our team members. And then another big piece that emerged was the rhythms. Anna mentioned this briefly as we're talking about the reaction mode we were in before, but we did not have really solid communication infrastructure, I would say, like within our team. We didn't have a good solid project management process and system. And so a big focus that came out of it was building a really solid, sustainable structure for communication, for evaluation, for proactive planning. And that was, immediately we started feeling the spaciousness that opened up in the breathing room. And our team was so grateful as we started implementing this. And it was as simple as just having basically a standing meeting of some kind that was CEO to Director of Operations, me and Anna together on a weekly basis, but it had very different purposes for each week. We had a different scope for every one of those meetings. One of them was a monthly planning session for the coming month. One of them was a business and financials review where we're looking high level at what is working and what's not within the business. We're reviewing the key performance indicators or reviewing the numbers, and we're seeing how does this now need to inform our monthly planning next week. So there's this iterative process of looking high level together. And I remember feeling this immense relief. I told Anna this like a million times, probably this immense relief of like, oh my gosh, I'm not having to try to pull her attention or try to find a time when I can have these conversations with her because I'm trying to hold the bigger picture of the business. That's my role with her. And to operationalize the vision. And I take that very seriously, but I need her time and attention on that higher level. But when we're stuck in the weeds, it's really hard to feel like we have the ability to even have those conversations, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I just, vulnerably, like on the leadership side, when you're not used to doing that, and yes, it's been you, but you haven't really been in the CEO role or operating where you're thinking about the higher level on a weekly basis, on a regular basis. And then you have somebody starting to say, oh, okay, I need this higher level vision for you, but you're in the weeds because that's where you're used to being. That brings up stuff. It's like irritating. It's I'm just going to say it. You're like, I don't know. I don't know. You're asking me questions and I don't know. And then you feel the internal backlash of that, like, I should know, and why don't I know, and all of these. And I say that because we have to grow into that. And part of that is the structure and the rhythms that we have put in place to set aside the time to intentionally say, okay, we're going to talk at the higher level. And then we do it. And then the next week, we're going to talk at the higher level. And then we do it. Like, this is how we grow, right? This is how we get used to it.
Yeah.
Because you can't just say, okay, I'm going to think like a visionary and CEO now, and then expect that to happen without having the structure and the gentle growing into it over time.
Yeah. It's like a framework. It's a foundation that can hold you in that and give you the structure that supports you in it. Not to constrain you or constrict you, but to give you freedom to operate within it and permission within it. So yeah, that was huge. And then another big one I want to speak to that emerged was we talked a little bit about the team's roles and responsibilities, but when we had that bigger picture vision clarity and we had a better sense of direction, now what emerged was, okay, well, here's the projects that will help us to get there, right? It's like now we move into strategy. So we know where we want to go. So how do we get there? That's the bridging the gap is the strategy. And so now it ushered in this initial restructuring of roles and responsibilities. And we started outlining them more clearly. But first, we just started outlining based on the projects and the vision, what roles are even needed And then we started to have conversations very organically with the team to explore, where do you see your gifts potentially fitting into this? And we wanted to let that emerge more organically rather than that very top-down approach that Anna was talking about of often like, we see all the tasks laid out, like, let's just make it happen. Let's throw a person at it. But no, we wanted to let our team members sit with the vision, sit with here's the quarter by quarter layout of what we're seeing. And where would you love to contribute? Like, what in there gets you excited that you would light up to contribute to? And that's how we started to kind of peel back the layers of where everyone's gifts and passions and strengths naturally align.
Yeah. And it was fascinating to see what came out of that, because it wasn't, I think, what either of us expected, where our team members were able to say, well, I really don't like doing this thing that I'm doing daily. I'm like, oh, okay, amazing. What would you rather do instead? And there's one particular thing where it was like, oh, okay, that's fantastic, because we probably would have hired out for that to bring somebody else on, but we already have you, and you want to do it. And that's beautiful. And that's something that we never would have known without asking the question.
Yeah. And that I want to bring awareness to the fact that that is a very, very vulnerable thing to do as a leader, is to open yourself up to real feedback from one of your team members and say, like, how do you actually feel about the work that you have been assigned? Like, and what we did was we were like, hey, all the recurring tasks and responsibilities that you do on a week-by-week basis or a monthly basis or day-by-day basis, write it all out, then rank order it 1 to 5 of like, how enjoyable or draining is this to you? And be really honest, because we want to know this so that we can better shape the role to be more life-giving to you. And then we can see, well, which of these could we then offload to somebody who loves that stuff, that doesn't light you up. But it is vulnerable to ask those questions, but it provides such a beautiful, honoring space for that team member. And we just received so much wonderful feedback from them of how valued they felt, and like, wow, my desires are taken into account. And that shouldn't be so rare, but it actually is rare for that to be the case, the way that you operate within an organization. It's not the traditional way of leadership that we see.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the internal things that goes on there is, I don't want to ask, because if something has to change, then that's on me. Especially when you're used to operating by yourself, or at least this, I'm holding everything and everybody else is just doing, or I'm assigning tasks. That's a different way. And we can operate differently, and more of a, okay, I'm loosely holding all this, but these other people who are with me are very much in it with me. And there is a level of trust of, well, we're going to let God be a part of this too? And recognize that if something emerges, that these people are here for a reason. And if this person has certain gifts, then we can hold space for a process of bringing those forward and for shifting things around.
Yeah, beautiful. So as we close here, I want to leave you with an analogy that Anna had originally taught me that I think is really beautiful. So in order to move forward, it requires seasons of stretch and seasons of more internal, you could call stretch and gather cycles. And I want to give you this analogy of an inchworm. So if you think about the way an inchworm moves forward, it like stretches its body forward first, right? And then like the back has to come catch up with the front. And so there's like a gathering, and then there's a stretching, and there's a gathering and a stretching. And I think we have felt that seasonally, even within the business, and even in the course of like a single month. When you look at a single isolated month, there's, weeks that are more internally focused, where it's like we're looking internally, we're focusing internally, we're getting stuff prepared, we're tilling the soil, we're taking care of things operationally, or our team members, or there's internal stuff happening in our life that we have to focus our capacity on. And then there's the going out, and maybe that's more of a focus on invitations and marketing for something, or we're speaking our voice more specifically, or we're doing more external client work. And there's the seasons of the business that comes with that. And so I think it's really good and healthy to recognize that if you're operating from this space of expecting yourself always to be looking and doing exactly the same things inside your business, and you're trying to force yourself to always be out there because consistency is king, then you're probably not actually giving yourself the space to stretch and gather in the way that you need to move forward. And that's something that is part of the shift to the more of the garden paradigm of looking at this as we can't force the fruit and we're not machines. We do the same exact thing and same input output. And it's very linear, but no, there's like a very real dynamic element to this that also is organic.
Yeah. And if you're a woman, it's even more natural for you. It's this the way that we're created to not do this. You don't ovulate every day, right? We can just look at that very example right there on us. We're not meant to be doing the same things every day and experience this linear growth.
Yeah. And so that's one analogy. And then the other one that I think is really relevant to this and that we've seen in so many of the clients that we've been working with, and especially a lot more of the operational foundations for growth and scaling, is before we continue to plant new seeds or try to grow what we already have, we sometimes need to tend to the soil. And I know we probably say that a lot, but I think we need to hear it over and over again and know that this is kind of what it looks like sometimes is we want the soil to be really fertile before we plant new seeds in it or before we just continue to water and expect that that grows the flower to be bigger, 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 right? And so we have to look at that. And there will be times when we are more soil focused and it sometimes can feel really uncomfortable if we're used to doing so much of the external work and we might feel like that's unproductive, but actually it's very, very productive. And it's probably the most important thing that you could focus on if you are at this crossroads point, this pivotal point, where you're wrestling with capacity thresholds and you're also noticing that there's traction and momentum and something that wants to break forward even more, but it's bottlenecked right now. That's where it's the invitation to tend to the soil.
I'm just listening you talk about this is, yeah, it's beautiful. And it is so different. It's so different because we can be very, very often we're sitting there. Like I just had this visual of being in the garden and you have the rows of plants and you're squatting there all tense. Like, okay, when's the flower going to come up? When's the flower going to go up? And it's this bracing, right? Like I'm just barely hanging on, waiting for that flower to come up. And then how long does it last? Until it dies, right? But naturally, that's just a part of the process. It's just a part of the cycle because then we go and it's a new season and now we're planting cucumbers, right? And or whatever it is. And so it takes gently starting to look at this in a different way and asking, what would it look like to embrace the tilling process and not just bracing for the flowering? And without forcing yourself, okay, I have to start thinking of this in a different way, but just an invitation to start wondering about like, what would that look and feel like to enjoy the tilling process and the planting process and the weeding process and all of these sub-processes of the way that we're operating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. So overall, one of the main takeaways here is that in these stretchy spaces, things can feel very disorienting. Things can feel confusing. Things can feel like you're really just figuring out one next right step at a time. But I think when you're being invited into a stretch of some kind, leaning into the pause and the discernment so that you can gain the clarity and direction that you need to move forward in an aligned way, that is so, so very important. Because that space for the discernment is what allows the forward movement, right? The coming together of the interim is what allows for the stretching and the moving forward again, right? So if you're in your own stretchy season in some way, shape, or form, whether it's in business or in personal life or the intersection of those two things feeling like a lot right now, I want to encourage you to slow down and let that could be your first step is like, what would it look and feel like to slow down? I wonder what the Lord wants to bring.
Yeah, and as uncomfortable, and it is deeply uncomfortable, and as uncomfortable as it is, as women of faith, remember that it is the most uncomfortable places that Jesus wants to meet us in the most, and where there's so much grace and where he can increase and where he can multiply all of that because we're able to let him into the most vulnerable places.
We hope you loved today's episode. If so, would you take a moment to share it with a friend?
If you haven't already, come connect with us human to human at apostolicfruit.com/connect. When you're ready, we'd love to support you more deeply.
May the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you.
And turn his face toward you and give you peace.